We missed being the dominant mobile operating system by a very tiny amount. We were clearly the company that should have achieved that, and we didn't.
How could one of the biggest tech companies in the world lose mobile? They had Bill Gates.
Well, a computer on every desk and in every home.
They owned PC market, and Windows was a monopoly. They had billions of dollars on tap. Was it Steve Ballmer effect? Was it a strategic error or a culture shift? Or was Microsoft simply out-executed in a brand new mobile-first market? Well, let's find out. Back in 1984, Steve Jobs revolutionized PCs by releasing Macintosh, first ever computer with graphical user interface. But nobody could afford it at $24.95. So Bill Gates released Microsoft Windows OS 1 year later, installed it on much cheaper IBM clones, and for half the price of the Mac, it did pretty much the same thing. Windows dominated personal and business computing, nearly running Apple into the ground in the 90s. It effectively was a bulletproof monopoly that made a big difference in Microsoft losing mobile years later. There is a golden rule in the world of tech companies. They must be either vertically integrated and platform-focused with software to differentiate the hardware. That's Apple and their Macs or iPhones. Or they must focus on services and be horizontal, meaning they offer services better than anyone else across all platforms and devices, like Google or Facebook. If you try to do both, it doesn't work. You don't succeed at either. And trouble for Microsoft was during Windows dominance years, they did exactly what was considered impossible. Windows was a monopoly that made Microsoft's software and services run anywhere because everything was running on Windows. There was no need to go vertical or horizontal. Bill Gates was making all the money in the world until it came to the mobile market. You have devices and you have services, and you have to make a decision which direction you would go. Licensing an operating system doesn't work because Google killed it, offering Android for free. Also, everything must run on low-power CPUs, so effectively, everyone is starting from scratch. Microsoft Mobile came out back in 2000s, and it wasn't a priority. But why would it? Windows was dominating, mobile hardware was terrible, and Steve Ballmer was notoriously out of touch with tech trends as a CEO. So then, about the same time when Apple announced iPhone in 2007, Microsoft was battling Windows Vista issues and making inroads into corporate data centers. Very important things. Ballmer famously said this: Steve's biggest concern was making sure that his 85-year-old uncle bought a Zune media player. How could you blame him? Just like the launch of Microsoft back in '84, iPhone created massive market demand, but it was too expensive. You'd think Microsoft would do the same thing they did with Windows and grab the bottom 90%, but they didn't. Google did. Google bought Android out of fear that Microsoft would dominate mobile the same way they did with PCs, and it turned out that the mobile devices, with their focus on touch and simplified interfaces and IRM foundation, they were nothing like PCs. Everyone had to start from scratch, and if starting from scratch was necessary, by definition, Microsoft, they didn't have any advantages. Bill Gates' company was so busy watching Apple as a competitor, they missed Google and Android altogether. Ballmer thought that they could do services and devices strategy the same way they did back in the Windows days, so they kept the price high to install the Windows Phone onto devices for manufacturers, and they charged developers high fees, like Apple, to submit apps to Microsoft Store.
Developers.
Phones were expensive, more than Android, and they lacked apps, Google class-leading apps like Search, YouTube, Maps, Gmail, Drive, all of those things. Google had better services, they offered more advantages to developers, and they owned Android, so nobody really needed a different platform. And Ballmer made a disastrous last-ditch effort to cling onto that mobile market and buy Nokia.
Thanks very much, Chris.
For Microsoft, it's also a signature event.
They were about to introduce Android phones, and Ballmer thought that if we lose Nokia, then Microsoft will lose mobile phone market. The trouble was, the Windows Phone was already dead, just unofficially. Steve Ballmer tried pushing devices business model with Nokia, but App Store didn't have enough apps, and phones weren't built to a massive scale, often selling at razor-thin margins, so that didn't work. And the services part didn't work either because Microsoft Office was installed on Windows phones for a long time, but appeared on iOS and Android very late with limited functionality. It was over. In 2017, after years trying to juice a dying platform, Microsoft finally killed it. They were locked out of the market. 3 years before iPhone was released, Steve Ballmer released a memo, Our Path Forward. And here's one section that loosely described how he saw mobile devices back then. Richness and intelligence of PC world. Microsoft couldn't divorce their Windows First mindset. And famous analyst Ben Thompson have said that this was this memo which marked the beginning of Microsoft's decline. You could argue that in a mobile world powered by IRM, where everyone started from scratch and Windows didn't really mean anything, Microsoft was simply out-executed. And the rest, as they say, is history. Thank you for watching. Consider subscribing to the channel, liking the video if you enjoyed this type of content, because I have more coming your way. And I'll see you as always in the next one.